Like this one,
Just not going to. I might do. Let's pull the chair over a bit. It's not going.
Move your chair.
Just give me a second. Just hold the mic there.
When you don't move your chair, just bring it over a little bit.
There. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just it. Yeah.
Sounds like.
One sec. Yeah, I'm muted.
I'll play.
Let me just. Can you play? Bismillah.
What to do?
Recite something.
Surah Fatiha.
Anything.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
Come on the mic. You did hear it, yeah?
Yeah, wait, you're going to give the mic to the. Give you your mic.
No, I mean, did this mic work? That's working, huh?
If you need the other one.
Both of them? No, just, I thought it might be better. The sound might be better, but...
Yeah.
Okay. Because with this, it's a bit echoey.
Leave it lower.
Okay, all right. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأصلي وسلم على رسول الكريم نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وذريته وأهل بيته ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. First question I have to ask because I know there's a lot of youngsters here. Actually, could you kind of all come a bit closer? Be better. First of all, just come a bit closer. But remain comfortable.
The pictures are coming through.
So, the first question I wanted to ask, especially some of you younger guys, put your hands up if you've heard of Az-Zubair ibn al-Awam. Put your hands up, put them up high, if you've heard of Az-Zubair ibn al-Awam. And if I was to ask you, could you tell me, if I was to say, pick any one of you randomly, and say, could you tell me some brief things about what's the most well-known things about Az-Zubair ibn al-Awam? Who could put their hands up and say, I know? From the youngsters. Okay, mashallah. One person. All right, so it stands then, if I was to ask you about the son of Az-Zubair al-Awam, put your hands up if you know about Abdullah ibn Zubair. If you know about Abdullah ibn Zubair and you could tell me something about him that's prominent, about his life. One thing. Who could put their hands up and say, I know one thing from the youth about Abdullah ibn Zubair? Okay. If I was to ask you about one of the most famous players who's now in Saudi Arabia, football players, could you all name who he is? All right. Do you see the imbalance? Yeah? Do you see it? After this talk, inshallah, about Abdullah, particularly as a child, inshallah, you will never forget. Inshallah, you'll never forget what this young man was and what he became as an older man. But to know a child, to know a person, generally in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you'd have to know his lineage. Where does he come from? Who's the father? Who's the mother? Who's the grandfather? Who are the aunts and the uncles? What are the people connected to them? And not to say, this is important that we understand this, Abdullah Ibn Zubair was often referred to as Hada ibn Abi, that this is the son of his father. Now you think about your fathers right now. You honor them, you respect them, you love them, you cherish them. If they're to be harmed in any way, you would be the first one to come to defend them. Hopefully that's correct. That they are your honor, and you honor them. You don't want to see them tired, you don't want to see them upset, you don't want to see them hurt. You want to come to their aid whenever you can. That should be your default position as a child. So Abdullah ibn Zubair, imagine, just think about this. When is he born? Imagine the Muslims have been persecuted, they're being killed, they're being thrown out of their homes, they're being boycotted in Mecca. And then they do the famous thing from which our calendar, the Islamic calendar, is dated from this date, the Hijrah. Our calendar is known as the Hijri calendar, whereas in the European calendar is known as the Gregorian, which is from after what they believe is before Christ or after Christ. And then after the Hijrah, there are many Jewish tribes that exist, and they play an important role in the history of Islam. They exist in Medina, what at that time is known as Yathrib, and it became known as Medina, and it's called Medina because it's Medina to Nabi. It becomes the city of the Prophet, and in short, today we know it as Medina, which just means the city. But really it was known Medina to Nabi. And what happens when the Muslims arrive is that there is a rumor, and imagine the rumor mills nowadays, somebody says something, and before you know it, it becomes like fact. And nobody's checked it. Nobody's actually looked to ascertain, is this the truth? Can you verify it? So a rumor is put about that the Jews have cursed. They put a curse, a spell on the Muslims. And that spell or that curse is that they can have no children. It's a ridiculous assertion, but it starts to spread. And time passes. Time passes. A few months pass, a few weeks pass, a few months pass, a year passes, then almost 2 years pass. And the wife of Az-Zubair, who's one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, which I'll mention to you in a little moment, Asma, who herself is the daughter of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, she becomes pregnant. And she gives birth to a child. And that child is named by Rasulullah ﷺ himself. He says the best two names that anyone can have, Abdullah and Abdurrahman. So he gives him this wonderful, beautiful name. And who is known as Abdullah before the Prophet ﷺ? His father. So he's honored from both ways, the best of names and the name of the father of the Prophet ﷺ. And he practices this thing that I'm sure many of you fathers may have practiced at tahniq, when he takes a piece of a date, he chews it and he puts it in the mouth of Abdullah. This is first practiced on him. This is one of the sunnahs of when a child is born. And what do people do? When he's born, everybody shouts, Allahu Akbar. The takbir runs and echoes throughout the cities of Medina that a child has been born. That's extremely important because something happens many years later, almost 80 years later, where everybody once again makes a takbir. Remember that point. Before we go on to Abdullah Ibn Zubair as a child and what he's like, and when famously he was known as Hada Ibn Abi, this is the son of his father. Who is his father? Zubair ibn Awam, he's one of the Ashara al-Mubashirin bil-Jannah. So he's one of the 10 that the Prophet ﷺ, he named them that they are promised paradise. Promised. Why? What's the reason? What did he do? What made him of such a stature that he comes sixth or seventh after the 4 Khulafa al-Rashidin? Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali. So he comes in the high rank already. Zubair ibn Awam is the kind of character that would never stay behind from any military expedition. Any time that the Prophet ﷺ is threatened, who's there? Zubair ibn Awam. Historically speaking, he's the first person who even drew his sword before the ayat of jihad were ever made compulsory or before they were revealed. He drew a sword in the defense of the Prophet ﷺ. He didn't use it, but he drew it. On an occasion at the Battle of the Trench, the Prophet ﷺ asked, who will bring me information about one of the Jewish tribes which would require him to leave the safety of the trench where they're protected and to risk his life? Who's going to bring me this information? And who replies, Ana, Ya Rasulullah, I will do it. He asks again. The Prophet ﷺ often did things 3 times. He often did things 3 times. So he asked again, and this is again to remove any doubt. Who will do this? And there's many Sahaba sitting around. Who will do this? Az-Zubair answers, Ana, I will, Ya Rasulullah. He asks again a 3rd time, who will do this? Ana, Ya Rasulullah. Then the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he makes a statement that is so powerful. When I recited in the Salah, I mentioned, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا أنصار الله كما قال عيسى بن مريم للحوارين. O you who believe, be the Ansar, the helpers of Allah. As Isa alayhi salam said to his who? Who are the Hawarin? The disciples, right? The famous 12 disciples, as according to the Christian traditions, there were 12. And be like them. But what are the disciples? Disciples have a particular position. There's many followers of Isa alayhi salam, but there are particular disciples, and a disciple, one who's devoted to the service of their teacher. كونوا أنصار الله كما قال عيسى بن مريم للحواريين من أنصاري إلى الله قال الحواريون نحن أنصار الله. The Hawariyun said, we are the helpers of Allah. We will come to your assistance. The Prophet ﷺ, at this point, when he said, who will come to assist, who will bring me the information, the Prophet ﷺ said, لِكُلِّ نَبِيٍّ حَوَارِي وَحَوَارِيِّ الزُّبَيْرِ. Every prophet has his disciple, and my disciple is a Zubair. As I said, he's present at Badr. He's present at Uhud. He's present whenever there's a battle taking place. He's present at the trench. And remember, these Sahaba, imagine you're already promised paradise. The Prophet ﷺ says that anybody who took part in Badr, nothing will harm them. Yawm al-Qiyamah. So they're already, the rank is so high. When the Prophet ﷺ passed away, of course the Sahaba were, it was a very difficult time for them. And of course, as you know, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu took up the mantle of Islam. He came to the defense of Islam. He said famously, "Man kana ya'bud Muhammad فإنه قد مات ومن كان يعبد الله فإنه حي لا يموت." At the time when people, Umar ibn Khattab was saying things like, don't you dare say that the Prophet ﷺ has passed away. Imagine they're broken. The Sahaba can't believe it. Some are saying that he's been taken up to the skies like Isa alayhi salam. Others are saying, no, you're mistaken. Umar ibn Khattab says, anybody who says that the Prophet ﷺ is dead, I'm going to strike his neck. And Abu Bakr, this frail old man who cries at the mention of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he comes along and he strengthens the ummah and he stands like a rock, like a pillar, and he brings it together and he says, whoever worshipped Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, let him know that he is dead. And whoever worshipped Allah, let him know that he is alive and can never die. And that held the ummah together when it was shaking. The enemies were threatening from left and right. People had left Islam, people refusing to pay the zakat, people claiming to be claiming to be prophets. All of that's happening, and Abu Bakr stands firm. And one of his key lieutenants, his key men, his warriors, who helps to stem the flow of all of these different groups is a Zubair ibn Awwam, because the Sahaba remember. The Prophet ﷺ said, every prophet has his hawari, his disciple, and my disciple is a Zubair. So at one of the battles, at one of the Battle of Yarmouk, famously at the Battle of Yarmouk. Now imagine this as a father. Just think about this as a father. I've been talking about kids at the moment, but just think about it as a father. The Battle of Yarmouk is the most, after Badr, scholars say it's the most decisive victory in the history of Islam. Why? Because the Muslims are fighting the Romans, or the Byzantines, as some people say, the Eastern Roman Empire. And history books say it's something from 100,000 to 120,000 versus 30,000 Muslims. Now, this is up in Yarmouk, which is today in modern-day Jordan / Syria, and the Muslims have already pushed to this direction. And some Sahaba look along. Khalid ibn al-Walid, the sword of Allah, he's leading the battle. And he's never lost a battle in his life, not even when he was a non-Muslim. When he was a kafir, he won the battle at Uhud, as you know. So this man, he does not lose. And the Prophet ﷺ gave him the title, Sayf Allah al-Maslul, the unsheathed sword of Allah. And so at this battle, Khalid ibn al-Walid is looking, he's reviewing the troops, reviewing the enemy. And one of the soldiers, the Mujahideen, says, Ma akthar min al-Rum. Look, there's nothing greater than the army of Rome. Look how huge it is. Khalid says, La taqul hada. Don't say that. Innama tansuru al-jaysh bil-iman. That don't say this. Verily, victory is given to an army by the faith that it holds. And in this battle, so there's a period of time, imagine 120,000. It's just like, the ratio is 1 to 4, 1 to 5. Imagine you as one man, taking on 5 people. Could you do it? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives these odds. He gives the odds, first of all, 1 against 20. And then he gives 1 against 2. So those odds are already stated in the Qur'an. So they're already worried. They're thinking about battle tactics. And one of the battle tactics is led by Az-Zubair ibn al-Awwam. I told you he's a warrior. In the middle of the battle, the Muslims are getting pushed. They're both getting pushed back. So Az-Zubair stands up and he says to a group of the Muslims, Man yuba'ani ala al-maut. It's a serious thing. Who is going to give me a pledge to fight to the death? So a group of the Muslims, they say, Nahnu, ana. So he rides with them. Right? Think about this. He rides with them into the ranks of the enemy, and every single one of them is killed, except the Zubair. Zubair, by the way, he's amongst the 2 Sahaba known to fight with 2 swords. So he doesn't use a shield, he has 2 swords, like Khalid ibn Walid. So he's striking left and right and left and right. It's hard to hit him. He's just naturally a fighter. Everyone's killed. He comes back again and he says, Man yuba'ani ala al-maut. And again, a group go with him. They fight to the bitter end until everyone is killed except Az-Zubair. He returns again, 3rd time. He says, Man yuba'ani ala al-maut. No one raises their hand. He said, man, if anybody goes with this guy, they end up getting killed. So now what he does. His son, at that time, Abdullah, who's around 10 years old. Some say 10, some say 12, some say 13 or whatever. But he's young. And he puts him on the back of his horse. Now he's trying to teach his people how, in one sense, he's completely unafraid, to the point at which he's ready to take his son now into this place where everybody else has been killed. So he puts Abdullah on his back, behind him, and he rides into the enemy, sword slashing left and right. Ambidextrous, as they call it, right? Somebody able to do the same thing with the left and the right. And he goes right through to the end and comes back. And when they see his personal bravery, this becomes one of the key reasons why the Muslims feel so empowered, that they've got leaders. He's not the leader of the army, but he is a leader of one of the flanks. So he rushes forward, and they see this and they all rush forward. And it brings about a change in Muslims, from Muslims losing the battle to the Muslims eventually winning the most decisive battle against the greatest power at that time. It's like defeating the United States or the Soviet Union. It's like that. It's to that level. So this is Zubair ibn al-Awwam. This is his character. In one battle, one of the enemies came forward completely covered, head to toe in armor, so that nothing was visible except his eyes. So he's completely covered in armor. And Zubair took a spear. And again, if you go into the museums, you'll see somebody that's a totally armored person. It's almost impossible to penetrate that armor, especially with the weapons of those days. And Zubair takes a spear and he strikes it right between the softest target on that person, which is between the eyes, like the place where he looks from. And famously, subhanAllah, when the Prophet ﷺ asked for that spear, and he gave it to him. When the Prophet ﷺ passed away, Zubair wanted it back, but then Abu Bakr asked for it. So he took it. And then when he passed away, he wanted to take it, and Umar asked for it. And so he gave it to him. And then when he passed away, he wanted to take it, and Uthman asked. So imagine this spear becomes now a symbol. And then when he passed away, he finally took it, and it was with him the day he died, this spear. So this is a Zubair ibn Awwam. This is just like a snapshot about the kind of character he is, the kind of person he is. So let's go back now to Abdullah, his son. Abdullah, the kind of character he is. Just think about this. He relates a hadith when he's 3 or so years old. And it's still in the books of hadith. It's in Kitab al-Maghazi, in Sahih Muslim. A hadith that he relates from the age of 3 years old. And inshallah, we'll mention some of the hadith that he also mentions and that relates to him, that we will know. Some hadith mentioned by Abdullah ibn Zubair that we will know. Abdullah ibn Zubair, now his mother, as I said to you, is Asma, the daughter of Abu Bakr. His father is a Zubair. His grandfather, his grandfather is he takes the name from the Prophet ﷺ. He's raised in the house of Aisha radiallahu anha. She has no children. So she becomes known as Abdullah because of him. She's known as Abdullah, though she has no children, but he's so close to her in the household that he's taken on that name. His uncle is Hamza ibn al-Abdul Muttalib. His aunt is Safiya. Safiya is a woman. She is also the the daughter of Abdul Muttalib, the sister of Hamza. In the Battle of the Trench, when some Jewish tribes a Jewish particular man tried to attack from behind, she went out because a man there who was a famous poet, Hassan ibn Thabit, he said, I can't go and fight, I can't defend you. So she went out herself. This is the kind of caliber of the person that's around Abdullah when he's just young, about 5 or 6 years old. She takes out the tent peg, which is not like the ones we have here, these tiny little ones, they're huge. She takes out a tent peg and she knocks down this person, this enemy who's trying to come from the back, and she kills him. Some sahabiyat, they say to me, Ya Safiya, why do you do this in front of him, in front of the child? He'll be afraid. And she said, no, this will make him stronger. So this is the kind of people that he's growing up around, kind of people that he's connected to, people that his lineage is connected to. There's an occasion when Abdullah ibn Zubair, do you know, all the guys know about cupping? When you take out old blood, you make little cuts, take out the old blood, yeah? Hijama. The Prophet ﷺ is sitting with the Sahaba, he's done hijama. And he gives Zubair, who at that time, Abdullah Ibn Zubair, who at that time is a young boy, he's about 6, 7 maybe years old. He gives him the blood, the old blood. And he says, take this and put this somewhere, rightly get rid of it. Dump it. Abdullah goes around, comes back, and he's got a little trace of blood dripping from his mouth. Salman al-Farsi looks at him, who's one of the great companions. He says, he drank it. ذَاكَ شَرَبَ. He drank that blood. The Prophet ﷺ asked him, did you drink that blood? He said, yes, Rasulullah. He said, why? He said, I could not think of any place that would be suitable for me to dump the blood of the Prophet ﷺ. I could not think of any place. Where would I throw such noble blood? So the Prophet ﷺ said to him famously, وَيْهَكَ لِلنَّاسِ وَلَيْهِ وَيْهِ النَّاسِ لَكَ. And people will be, I don't know how to write translation of this, but may people be afraid of you and you feel afraid of people. Abdullah Ibn Zubair one day was playing with kids, with all young kids, 10, 11, 12 years old. And famously, Umar ibn Khattab was known as a person, they'd say the shaitan would cross the road of Abu Bakr if Umar ibn Khattab is coming along. Everybody be afraid of Umar ibn Khattab. Even the wives of the Prophet ﷺ used to hide from him. So he's playing with his friends. Imagine one day, imagine you as a kid. Some guy comes along and he's known to be tough. He's known to be, you don't mess with this guy. He puts the shivers down your back the moment you see him. So he's walking along, all the kids see him, they run. They leg it, literally. They say, oh, or they move to the side. Abdullah ibn Zubair remains in his place. He doesn't move. He doesn't move an inch. He's not afraid and he doesn't run. Umar ibn Khattab approaches him and he says to him, all your friends legged it, all your friends ran away. Why did you remain? Does anybody know what he says? He says, I have nothing to be afraid of. I've done nothing wrong for me to run. And the road is not so narrow that I need to move out the way. And here, Umar al-Khattab says, هَذَا ibn Abi, that this is the son of his father. So he's already learned a type of training from his father. One of the things he says, that when he was a kid, because Zubair was struck, he had 2 wounds on his back, and one was deep. He said, when I was a kid, I used to play on my father's back. I used to put my fist into his back, and it would fit into this place where the wound had been created. So this kid's tarbiyah, his teaching, his understanding, his father, obviously, fathers, sometimes they take their kids they brought them here, but they take them with them for them to learn, not just from the father, but from the father's friends and companions. And the child listens, the child serves. If you think about it, the Prophet ﷺ now, he's sitting with the companions. All the companions are there. He's there, this young kid. Does he tell one of the older Sahaba, you go do this? Why does he tell the kid to do this? So that it's understood and the kid understands that you're at an age where you do khidmah, where you serve, where you honor, where you are trusted, and where you are a representative of your father. So he understood that. He's from that generation, he's from that tarbiyah where the honor is given. So Abdullah ibn Zubair, as a young man, is being taught by his father, not, son, do this, this is right, this is wrong, this hadith, etc. That has its place. But he's learning by example. He's learning by being present. He's learning by acting, listening. You don't hear about Abdullah ibn Zubair arguing with his father, ever. You don't hear about him ever disrespecting his father. You don't hear about him ever speaking back to his father. You only hear about him constantly honoring him And when we say his name, by the way, Abdullah ibn Zubair, do we say radiyallahu anhu or radiyallahu anhuma? Which one do we say? What's the difference? So we're talking about two people here, right? Abdullah ibn Zubair. So we say radiyallahu anhuma, may Allah be pleased with those two, right? So this is his bringing up. This is his upbringing. This is the kind of person he's around. And as time goes on, Abdullah ibn Zubair becomes a person known for his knowledge, his worship, his commitment to the deen, his integrity, and his devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's known famously when Abdullah ibn Zubair, this is Abdullah we're talking about now, he would go into sajda, or he'd go and he'd pray, or make a dua and so forth. Pigeons would come and sit on him, thinking that he is an immovable structure, like he's a wall or something, because he'd be so connected to his devotion that he wouldn't move. Whether he's in sajda, whether he's sitting between the sajda, whether he's in ruku', whether he's just making dua. That's the kind of devotion, singular devotion that he used to have. And one of the things that Abdullah ibn Zubair, as he goes and he becomes older, of course his father's no longer around, but he becomes, because of his father, because of the honor, and inshallah many of you will have already experienced this, that because of the honor people give to your father, they by extension offer you that same honor. Oh, you're the son of so-and-so, haven't you come across that? You must have come across that, right? Oh, you're the son of this man. You're the son of this woman. Oh, as a result of that, people honor you. And you, as a result, should honor your father's friends, your mother's friends, as well as your relatives. And so that was very much the society that they grew up in, that they honored one another and respected one another, even when they differed with them, which is extremely important when we get to the story of what happened later in the life of Abdullah ibn Zubair. I'm going to try and fast forward a little bit, just because there's a lot of time, and I know you guys are tired. You've had a hard day. I've still got water stuck in my ear from the swimming, and of course swimming does tire you out. But we're not here. I did say this before. We're not here just to have a good time, right? And it all depends on your interpretation of what a good time means. You know, the Prophet ﷺ used to say famously, "Arihna biha ya Bilal." Oh Bilal, bring us a good time, bring us peace, tranquility, and serenity with the prayer, because Bilal would call the adhan, and if you're calling the adhan, that means it's prayer time. So arihna biha ya Bilal means, oh Bilal, bring us tranquility with the prayer. So it all depends on your interpretation of a good time. But the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ used to understand Salah to be also a good time. And so what I want us to take from this is that, remember I said to you that I hope and pray that once you hear the story of the life of Abdullah ibn Zubair, inshallah you'll never forget it. There are some scholars who say that Abdullah ibn Zubair was amongst not just of the ulama of Muslimin, not just of the mujahideen of the Muslimin, but he was also one of the khulafa or the khalifas of the Muslims. And that's something that happened. There was disputes between Sahaba that came, and there was, for a period of time, Abdullah ibn Zubair actually became the ruler of the Muslim world. I'll say that again. He became the khalifa of the Muslim world. So we know the names of Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali. And we know about Muawiyah, and we know about Yazid and so forth. But actually, from the people who are regarded as the top members of the Sahaba and their sons, Abdullah ibn Zubair is included by many scholars as one of the khulafa of the Muslimin. And there's some parts about that that's disputed, about what took place and so forth. I'm not going to get into all of the details. But there comes a time in Abdullah ibn Zubair's life where he's much older. And bear this in mind. All of the great leaders of the Muslims now have passed away, most of them. Abdullah took part in battles and conquests. He's present as I said, in Syria. He's present in Egypt, and in a famous Battle of Afriqiya, which is the conquest of the region that eventually is taken by the Muslims in North Africa. So this Abdullah's presence, he's one of those, whenever he hears that a call has been made to fight and defend Islam, he's there. Throughout his life. A point comes in which there's a great dispute between Sahaba and so forth. And as I said, Abdullah becomes the ruler of Mecca. He's in charge of Mecca, as well as many other parts of the Muslim world. And those who oppose him, chief person that opposes him is Abdul Malik bin Marwan, and his chief general is named Hajjaj ibn al-Yusuf. And Hajjaj surrounds Mecca, and he uses different types of weapons, including catapults, to attack Abdullah ibn Zubair. And by this time, Abdullah has tried to defend himself as much as possible. But because of the use of these heavy weapons, and because of him also not wanting to cause too much bloodshed between Muslims, he allows people to leave his army, including his sons who are with him. So he's a much older person now. But his mother, Asma, is still with him. His mother, who's the daughter of Abu Bakr, she's still with him. She's around 92 odd years old at that time. And now imagine he's totally surrounded. Totally surrounded. And he has very, very few options. One is to give up and surrender. The other is to seek some kind of negotiation. And the other is to fight to the death. So there's a conversation that takes place after his own sons leave his side. And this conversation, he says, I'm gonna read it out to you rather than just paraphrase. He says to his mother, he calls for her because he wants her advice. And think about this. Again, this is to honor his mother. He does this to honor his mother, not for any other reason. And we'll see that from what he says. He says, I'm afraid that I will be mutilated, that they will take my body and cut it into pieces and display it. He's afraid about that. And so this is now the mother speaking to the son. And you all know from your own mothers how much they love you. What does she say? What do you think she says? What do you think she says to him? I'm afraid that my body will be cut into pieces. What do you think she says to him? Just take a guess, somebody. Not those who know. All right. What do you think your mother would say to you? Just say, people have surrounded your house. You've been fighting to defend yourself. You think maybe give up? Okay. Anybody else? What do you think your mother would say to you?
Maybe that he's the son of Zubair. So.
Maybe he's the son of Zubair.
Save yourself.
Okay, I want the kids. I want the kids. I'm asking you, what do you think your mother would say to you? Huh? Run. Okay. Good. Run. What else? Huh?
Don't worry.
Don't worry. Don't worry, they're coming to get you.
No. Don't worry.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, you'll fight back.
Don't worry, you'll fight back. Okay.
Just
Right. Anything else? This is what she said to him. Listen to this. Listen. She said to her son, after someone has died, it won't make any difference what they do to you once you've been killed. What is he afraid of? He's afraid that they're going to cut his body up. Right? He's afraid that they're going to mutilate him. They're going to stick him up on a cross after he dies. And what does she say to him? It doesn't matter what happens to you after you die. Because you're already dead. It's done. The deed is done. You're already dead. So he says to his mother, I did not come to you. I did not come to you except to increase myself in knowledge. So now he's telling his mother, you're my teacher. You're teaching me what I need to know at the most crucial part of my life, which is just before my death. Because he knows death is coming. And he says, I only came to seek knowledge from you and look and pay attention to this day, for verily I am already what? I am already dead. I'm a dead man walking. And then he says, your son, he never drank wine, he never committed fahisha, he never committed any bad things. He never wronged any Muslim or disbeliever. Look at that. He's saying this now at the point of his death. Ya Ummah, I never wronged, oh mother, I never wronged any Muslim or kafir. So to him now, even at the point of his death, he's quoting what? That I was always just. Not to praise himself, because who's his audience? Who's his audience? His mother. So it's not like he's praising himself to everybody. He's talking to his mother. And he says, and then he adds that I was not unjust to anyone. And I'm not saying this to show off or to show you how pure I am. He says, I am doing this to honor you, my dear mother. Look at that. He honors his father throughout his life. Now, when it comes to the point of close to his death, he's honoring his mother. So then, at this point, Abdullah is wearing armor. He removes the armor. That means, if you've removed your armor, what does that mean? You're not going to seek death, but you know that death is coming. Right? You know it's coming. And he goes forward, and within a few blows, he's killed. He's totally surrounded. There's nobody left with him. And what happens next? Hajjaj, and some people say he's one of the cruelest leaders to ever have existed in the Muslim world, though he is a Muslim. He has his body mutilated, beheaded, and then displayed. Where? Where is this happening? Huh? Anybody remember where this is happening? Mecca. Put your hand up if you've been to Mecca. Put your hand up if you've thought about Abdullah Ibn Zubair's body being hung in Mecca outside the Kaaba when you've gone there.
I've searched for his grave.
SubhanAllah. So think about that, right? Abdullah Ibn Zubair. Now what happens at the point of his death? Do you know what happens? Remember I said to you, everybody said when he's born, because it was like a miracle that this child has been born, because they believed that the Jews had placed a curse on the Muslims Muslims. They all said, Allahu Akbar. Now when he's dead, what did they say? Allahu Akbar. Everybody's making takbir. This is the enemy's side. And who comes along and reminds them all this? Because he's an older man. Many Sahaba have passed away. Many people have forgotten what happened in those days. In fact, one of the reasons why it's so easy to fight and kill him is it's a new generation who doesn't know anything about what he's done in the past. They don't know much about who he is. The older generation all know him. Abdullah ibn Umar, the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he comes along and he says, look, they made takbir when he was born, now they make takbir now that he's dead. So, Al-Hajjaj comes to Asma, his mother, and he says that I will only bring down his body if she comes and pleads for it. He wants to humiliate her. And what do you think Asma does? She refuses. She refuses. She refuses to be humiliated or for her son to be humiliated in terms of how he met his end. In the end, people go to Hajjaj and they bring his body down and he's brought down and he's buried. So this is the lesson, this is the story of the life and the death of Abdullah ibn Zubair. And I mentioned to you that there's, people leave a legacy, there's all sorts of legacies, but the greatest legacy of Abdullah ibn Zubair, in addition to his resistance, remember we believe that he was the rightful leader for many, many reasons. primarily because of his own lineage, of his own position, of his taqwa, of his rank as the Sahaba, from amongst the Sahaba. But also, one of the greatest things that any of the Sahaba left behind was their narrations of the Prophet ﷺ and what he had left behind. So one of the hadith I mentioned to you, that as a child, he narrates a hadith as a child when he's around 3 years old. And some people think, how is that possible? But it is possible. You find children nowadays, to this day, people comment on, oh, look at that child. He's memorized so much. He knows this. And it's just a child, a miracle child, right? So it's not beyond comprehension. And the hadith that he mentions in relation to where Abdullah Ibn Zubair talks to so he mentions it to his father. And he says, I saw you entering into the enemy at a particular place. And he said, you saw me? He said, yes, I saw you entering 2 or 3 times. And that's basically the hadith. Some people say that could be to do with him going 2 or 3 times. Remember we said that he said he entered, who's going to give me the pledge to death? And he comes back and everybody's killed. It could be an interpretation of that. It could be something else. But he mentioned there's a hadith. There are other hadith that's mentioned. One is that it's narrated from Abdullah Ibn Zubair radiallahu anhu, that after every salah, he would say, La ilaha illallah. So that's one of the things narrated from him that he'd say after. So these are some practical things that we do often, quoting in relation to what he would say as a practical part of our deen. I did look through to see, there are many other hadith mentioned about him. I've mentioned some of them here to you already. But suffice to say that if you look at the sons of somebody, now it's not always necessary. Think about this. There's a man, you all know the name Abu Jahl. Everybody know who's Abu Jahl? Yeah? Abu Jahl was the key enemy of Islam. He was known as Fir'aun, or the Pharaoh of this ummah, the guy who hated Islam and he wanted to kill the Prophet ﷺ, and he fought all his life until he was killed at Badr. He had a son. His son's name was Ikrimah. And Ikrimah, when he heard his father was killed in the battle, again by a young man called Abdullah Ibn Mas'ud, he became a sworn enemy of Islam and continued to scheme and fight against Islam in any way that he could, until the Muslims captured and conquered Mecca. And Mecca was conquered without a single stroke, without any killing. And he went on the run. And the Prophet ﷺ famously said, when he took over Mecca, he said, "La tathrib alaykum yawm," no vengeance on you this day. Same as Yusuf ﷺ said to his brothers when they came and recognized who he was. "Idhabu fa antum at-talaqa." Go, you're all free. You can go wherever you want, but he sent messages for Ikrimah, come back. Enter Islam, you will be safe. And you know what Ikrimah said? He said, how can I become a Muslim when my father, whose real name was Umar ibn Hisham, and was previously known as Abu al-Hakam, the father of wisdom, when he opposed the Prophet ﷺ, his name was changed to Abu Jahl, the father of ignorance. So I will always be known as the son of Ikrimah ibn Abu Jahl. My father was the enemy of Islam, and I will always be known as the son of the ignorant, the father of ignorance. How can I live with that name? So that's the only reason why he didn't want to become Muslim. And that eventually he did. And Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl is famous because at one of the famous battles, I forget which one, he takes a group of 400 with him and he rushes into battle for the Muslims, the same people who killed his father. He now understood the message of Islam, the universal message of Islam, and he now rushes into battle and he is killed shaheed, inshallah. So it's not always that if your father, whatever he was or wherever he comes from, in the end, whatever it is that you do as an individual, we're not like the Jews or the Christians who say the sins of the father will fall upon the sons. Each person will be held to account, rewarded judged or punished based upon what they did, not based upon what your father or your brother or your mother or your aunt or your uncle did. You won't be held accountable for what somebody else did. You'll be held accountable for what you did. But what we know also, as I said again, is that this talk was titled The Honorable Son of an Honorable Father. It's because here you have a father, you have a son, they're both connected. We don't hear much about what happens to the son of Abdullah Ibn Zubair, or his son, or his son. So these are two uniquely placed individuals connected by their devotion to Islam, by their connection to the Prophet ﷺ, and a unique Qur'anic generation. Sallallahu sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam wa jazakumullahu khair. If there's any questions, keep them to yourself.
Any questions?
No, if there's any questions, Abu Bakr will take them. Let me ask you a question then. Do you think it's likely you're going to forget about Abdullah ibn Zubair? Did you have an idea of who he was before this?
No.
No?
Also, it was the intro of the life. It was just a line.
You just thought it was a life story of somebody? Okay. Do you think, one of the beautiful things about us as Muslims, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, "Ballighu anni walau ayah," that teach from me, even if it's just one little verse, one little statement, a few words. So how about you do this? Let's about a practical thing that you could do as kids, particularly. Talk about Abdullah ibn Zubair in particular, because you've heard it here, to your friends. Ask them what I asked you. Ask them, have you ever heard of this? And ask them, what do you think your mother would say? If you were in a position, let's say a whole bunch of neo-Nazis came outside your house. They want to smash you up because you're a Paki or you look like one. What do you think they would say? Not to incite anybody to do anything. I'm just asking, just ask some questions. Because the conditions also are, he's not just a person, he's not just a fighter. That's not who he is. He is a Muslim who's devoted to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As he says, I've never done all those wrong things. I've never fornicated. I've never drunk wine. I've never eaten haram. I've never been unjust to a Muslim or to a kafir. Fulfill those conditions. So then ask, if I was that kind of person, what would my mother say to me? Okay, inshallah, we'll end there. Jazakumullah.